Okay, everybody, welcome to the next edition of the Kinesiology Lockdown webinar series. Today we're going to be looking at EMF stress or electromagnetic radiation and the stress caused by electromagnetic radiation, and I'll talk about various things, including different models of how you can get damage into your DNA and everything, and what is known in other models that are just thought of, or really a hypothesis, really. We'll look at oxidative stress and nitrative stress in the cell and how that is, the effect of electromagnetic radiation, if there is one, that is the actual effector of it, is causing reactive oxygen stress within the cell. And then I'll look at different types of frequencies that go along with that, such as, obviously I'm going to look at the mobile telephone 3G, 4G and 5G. Also, we'll be looking at various other things that, like brain waves, I find very interesting. And, other things like vision and stuff like that, where electromagnetic stress, could it actually interfere with our neurological function because our neurons are oscillating at that frequency in their brain waves, and also the frequencies for the auditory and visual spectrums as well. So I think it's all very interesting, and so I'll be looking at that and also talking about geopathic stress and the Schumann resonances. I don't know if you had a chance to look at your PowerPoints. We got organised this time and sent them to you yesterday. And so if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, you'll find the link to download it below the introductory part of in the YouTube channel. But if you're on the live webinar, you would have received an email yesterday with a link to download the PDF. So what are we actually looking at? We're looking at the electromagnetic spectrum, which is a range of frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. And these frequencies are divided into various bands. Okay, and these are the known bands, and this is not anything this is just from physics or whatever. And what you can see there is, if you start really down at the very low ones, that, these very low hertz, and hertz is 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. So that's the definition of a hertz. So these very low ones is where our brain waves operate at, and I find this very interesting. Here in the radio waves, the UHF, the VHF, you might remember, your televisions and videos and all this. Up here in the microwaves, this ultra high frequency is where the 3G and 4G telephones operate. The 5G is operating up in these two, in the gigahertz range, whereas the 3G and 4G operate in the megahertz range. I'll talk about that and interesting discussions I've had with my brother, who's a physics professor, and other people who I know who are studying physics, like my sons, and what they, from a physicist's point of view, how they see the whole thing. And whereas I know in 5G there's a lot of controversy around it at the moment, and I'm not going to go into that at all. I'm just here to talk about, this is the frequency range, and this is how we can balance stress to various frequency ranges in the human body. Then you've got up here the infrared and ultraviolet, and this near ultraviolet, the very bottom of it is where the visual spectrum is. Then up here you've got the ionizing radiation ranges, which is the extreme ultraviolet, the X-rays and the gamma rays. These are the ones where they know that the ionizing radiation causes damage to DNA directly. And that is known, and that's why we have problems with the, say here in Australia. So here in Australia, we have the hole in the ozone layer, so people have, get skin cancer and everything and that from the extreme ultraviolet radiation. And of course, X-rays, anyone who's been to your dentist or to be a place where they take X-rays, all the people run out of the room, because if they're being exposed to it over time, then they have a higher risk of some sort of, like a professional damage to, from their profession, they get damage. If it's for us, we just get it once every blue moon. Well, it's not going to hurt anyone. So let's look first at the whole model of why can there be stress around electromagnetic radiation. And certainly I know, if you look at it from a physics point of view, they'll only say the only evidence is up here in the ionizing radiations, and that's the only evidence there is of, actual damage to the human body from electromagnetic radiation. What we've certainly observed, I know, in kinesiology and in natural therapies, is that there is some kind of level of stress around electromagnetic radiation, even right down to the lowest ones, where there are even people that can't even, be around things like that because it really affects them a lot. And I believe, it's my hypothesis, is that it might be something to do with the chakra system, because everything that's, if we look at it from a physics point of view, they can't understand how there is a problem with this kind of frequencies that is non-ionizing radiation. But we observe people have some kind of sensitivity, and we know when we're balancing people to it, and I've certainly got my in-depth EMF course that I've written recently. I've only taught it once so far, and certainly the feedback I've got from the group in the United States has been extremely positive. And so these are the frequency ranges. And first of all, before we look at the different things and, like the brain and everything like this, let's have a look at cellular pathology. And, some cellular radiation injury can include ionizing radiation, ultraviolet radiation, and non-ionizing radiation. And they know, from when I actually studied the actual pathology of cells, that there can be injury due to these different types of radiation, and that the damage is caused by reactive oxygen and reactive nitrogen species to cell membranes in the DNA. And this is an interesting picture I found. And you can see down the bottom here where you've got the ionizing radiation, you've got direct damage to the DNA. And this here, the non-ionizing radiation, say from cell phones, and this was actually produced by one of the companies that makes guards against cell phones. And so certainly it's something that, I would say is a hypothesis, is that the non-ionizing radiation from, well, if it's from cell phones, it would be microwaves, which is both 3G, 4G, and 5G are microwave frequencies. They hit the water and cause the development of the free radicals. And then when you get the reactive which is the reactive oxygen species and the reactive nitrogen species, so you can't discount them. Reactive oxygen then can create reactive nitrogen, and it's something that's kind of missed, and something that I only really came into my, someone brought it to me and I had never heard of it. And it's like everything, I get fascinated by these things. We've heard of reactive oxygen, but now there's reactive nitrogen. And so first thing is you can see is that the reactive oxygen and nitrogen can cause damage to the DNA and also to the cell membranes, where you get specifically here in the membranes, you can see these little molecules here, they're called phospholipids. And this ball on the end is the phosphate group. And these little tails hanging down are the lipid groups, often fatty acids and inositol and other lecithin, other kinds of fats, and they have a lot of double bonds in them. And so double bonds are when you've got two carbon molecules sharing 4 electrons to give stability to the molecule. But what it does is when you have a double bond is it puts a bend in the fat, and it spreads out these, they call it the phospholipid bilayer. It spreads them out and it makes the membrane very flexible. If you have a lot of saturated fat in there, which is no double bonds, what it does is it makes the membrane very rigid and it inhibits the proper functioning of the membrane. So what happens though is when you get these reactive oxygens like the superoxide, which is the main one that's produced usually it's produced as a byproduct of biochemical reactions. And so we have a whole system in our body to deal with it. Things like glutathione, some enzymes like here, superoxide dismutase, catalase, glutathione, peroxidase, which activates glutathione, vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin A, all help to protect the membranes against the damage. And this is, so we have this whole system of antioxidants to fight the reactive oxygen. And that's why they call them antioxidants, because they cause this kind of stress, oxidative stress, caused by the reactive oxygen species. And you can see up here some of the causes of it, like pollution, ultraviolet radiation, smoke, other kinds of radiation, and also stress as well causes it as well. And things like perceived stress is very important. So then you've got nitrosative stress, which is caused by the reactive nitrogen species called peroxynitrite. And this is where you get nitric oxide and the superoxide radical, which we saw here, the superoxide radical, which this is the byproduct. Now to neutralize, to convert this, it has to be converted into hydrogen peroxide first. This is what the enzyme superoxide dismutase does. Now we have 3 versions of it and it has a complex cofactor system. And so often that this can be slow. Once we get here to hydrogen peroxide, we've got various enzymes that can deal with this, like catalase, another one called peroxidase, glutathione, and that. You've got different ways to deal with it, so it's generally easier to deal with this. But if our superoxide dismutase doesn't deal with this properly, what happens is the superoxide radical hangs around and then it can combine with nitric oxide to form this peroxynitrite that oxidizes the iron in heme. And then you can have all kinds of problems because you get tissue injury, but also you can imagine you've got hemoglobin for the transport of oxygen in your blood, but also heme is a very important cofactor for many enzymes, and anyone who has pyroluria or the pyrrole condition, that they have a problem producing heme. So anyone with this condition would be affected more by damage to heme. So, and here you've got, this is the peroxynitrite, and you can see up here, you've got nitric oxide, the superoxide radical formed from normal biochemical reactions, and you get all kinds of things happening because of this in the mitochondria and cell death and everything like this. And just some pictures there. This is the nitric oxide, the superoxide radical. You can see it's got this negative charge. It's missing an electron, and it wants to steal an electron off someone. But then it combines with this to give the reactive nitrogen species. So that's the actual picture of it. And this is the molecule, the peroxynitrite. Okay, so this is sort of the background. So when dealing with the electromagnetic radiation stress in the body, you've got to understand that downstream effect is the reactive oxygen. So one thing, you know, if you wanted to, if you're stressed out about any kind of radiation stress in your life, you know, maybe having a good antioxidant supplementation would help against that. Because if you are producing more reactive oxygen and reactive nitrogen, the antioxidants will help against that, and you would need a higher amount of it. But you know, as always, if you're going to do that, you should see a duly qualified health practitioner, such as a naturopath or an integrative doctor or someone like this, or a nutritionist, someone who's qualified to actually prescribe the correct supplements for the antioxidants, and also to get really good quality ones from one of the, like here in Australia, there's very good nutraceutical companies that make excellent products. And I'd certainly prefer to spend money on that than just go and get, you know, my, I don't know, the multivitamin from the health food aisle in the supermarket. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, let's have a look at some of the things that we're going to look at here. You know, there's the 5G, which is the 6 to 100 gigahertz, and the 30 to 300 gigahertz. So they were two ranges, there was three ranges of the microwaves. The highest, they're the highest two, the super high frequency and the extremely high frequency. That's what those ranges are called. We've got geopathic stress, and I'll talk about the Schumann resonances. That really fascinated me, that. The brain waves, so they're the very low ones right at the bottom where we had 3 to 200 hertz. We'll have a look at that. The visual spectrum is the 405 to 790 T hertz, and so that was in the near ultraviolet range. The auditory spectrum is in the hertz, that's average for humans. I mean, other animals have a higher range of auditory, and so this is 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. And MRIs is interesting. When I taught the course for the first time in January in the United States, you know, someone brought it up about MRIs and how they have a specific frequency, and I just found it interesting, so we looked it up. So, you know, if anyone's had an MRI, that's the kind of range that you're working on in this megahertz range, and they are actually in the microwaves. So. And so looking at the 5G, this is a little bit different to what you've got in your PowerPoints, because I just added stuff. You've got the, you know, the 5G, this is called the millimeter band because the wavelengths are actually measured in millimeters. They're the microwaves. 5G are the 6 to 100 gigahertz, the 30 to 300 gigahertz, where the 3G and 4G are operating on the same frequencies around about. They're just slightly different bands, but it's in the megahertz range, but it's still the ultra high frequencies. And if you go back to this, I just put this in here with the, you know, like this is the table you had before. You can see up here you've got the 5G, and down here you've got the 3G and 4G, but they're all in the microwave. And, you know, talking to my brother, who's a physics professor, and, you know, I saw him last year, and well, I just asked him, you know, like, I'm just curious because there's so much controversy around the 5G, and I just wanted to know what he thought, as he is a physics professor and actually specialized in working in the kind of electromagnetic field for a while. And, you know, he can't understand why, you know, a physicist can't tell you why these frequencies are more damaging than these frequencies. But he said he was, you know, a long time ago, he was at a conference and where they presented a model for 5G. And he said, you know, these were his words. He says, it's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. He said, they need to have a repeater every kilometre. And he said, because of that so high, you have to keep repeating the signal. So all the repeaters you would have to put up would cost an absolute fortune. I just don't personally understand the economics of it, because the amount of these things that they're going to have to stick up everywhere is just incredible. And, you know, and just from that point of view, that's what the way he saw it. He can't say why these frequencies are any worse than those or whatever, but we do know that microwaves cook your brain. And back in the 3G and 4G days, when he had a friend of his did some research on it, and because, you know, the microwaves can cook food, for example, and he would just say, if you're talking without an earpiece, just change your ear every 5 minutes, because, you know, after 5 minutes, you start creating more damage within your cell. And if the frequencies are affecting the water, and you have to understand our body's 60% water, and 2/3 of our body water, that's 40% of our body weight, is intracellular water. So that means if with 40% of our body weight is intracellular water, that means we, you know, like if this ionizing radiation is affecting the water to create more reactive oxygen, if you're putting a phone up against your head, whether it's 3G, 4G or 5G, you're getting that frequencies going into your cells, and could be, you know, that the model of that I showed you before of a way that these microwaves can cause reactive oxygen is by affecting the water molecules, and we have a lot of water molecules. So, yeah. So that's the interesting thing about that. That's all I've got to say about it. You know, for people who are concerned in terms of kinesiology, you know, certainly we can balance it, and I'll share some of the things I've got, like a couple of formats at the end, and how you can use it. If you really want to go into it, I've got a 2-day workshop on it that goes into the depths of all of the things I'm talking about, not just this. And I mean, at the end of the first time I taught the course, I had a 5G balance. So when I went in, the first manual didn't have it in there, but it does now. But anyway, it's because everyone wants it. And so, okay, I'll put it in there, and it's up to you to how you use it. Brain waves are kind of interesting. And again, it's you know, you can see these frequencies, because we saw the very low one was 3 to 30, but right down here, this is, you know, there's some really deep sleep and meditation, the waking state, and I'm not going to go into too much into this. It's not an area that I know too much about, but, you know, these kind of interesting up here in the lambda range. We got 100 to 200 hertz, very high frequencies associated with wholeness and integration, associated with mystical and outer body experience, synchronization of the left-right brain hemisphere, sometimes experiences the aha state, and gamma, you know, love, altruism, higher values. So you can see it's kind of interesting that if our, you know, and brain waves, the way I think of brain waves, they're like your neurons fire in a pattern. And so if the pattern of firing is quicker, the way when you scan the brain with an EEG, you see these waves, and it's just the frequency of the waves. So up here in these higher ones where you've got love, altruism, and wholeness and integration, you know, these are the higher frequencies. But if you've got electromagnetic stress on these frequencies as well, so the idea is that if the electromagnetic stress is resonating at that specific frequency, it might interfere with how the brain actually how the brain operates on those frequencies. And so that was my idea about that, was to develop, is to use it, because later on when we're doing other areas, balancing, you know, balancing to, say, I don't know, geopathic stress, balancing to something like, you know, microwave, you know, 3G, 4G or 5G like telephones or anything else, there could be a downstream effect on our brain. And so we're losing brain integration and we can't think properly. And so this was my idea when I looked at this, and it's certainly, it's about balancing the possibility that there is stress in the different brain frequencies, matching the frequency of any electromagnetic radiation at that frequency. Because if they're at the same frequency, there's going to be some kind of connection. Mediation, I do mean meditation. Does it say mediation? Okay, well, you know, maybe you want to meditate on mediating. Mediation, oh, it does too. So there's a T missing, you know. Well, maybe I was in deep sleep when I wrote it. Anyway, you can see here beta is the waking state. So this is like being alert. Alpha, healing, light sleep, meditation, intuition. Then you've got down here some deep sleep, and like these are very interesting because these are heading to the more spiritual states as well. These high frequencies, you've got this out of body experience and feeling oneness, but this is the deep unconscious and non-dual oneness, etc. And the left and right brain feelings of wholeness and integration like you have up here. So like a yogi in suspended animation, so that kind of thing. So anyway, so these are the brain frequencies. I managed to stick them in there for you. So anyway, so you can do that. And something that's interesting is these Schumann resonances. And so these Schumann resonances actually are there at the frequency of brain waves, which I found very interesting. And it's something that sort of, which leads to geopathic stress as well. But, you know, so the idea is you've got all these thunderstorms and everything, and you've got these waves produced around the globe. So there's any moment, there's 2,000 thunderstorms and some 50 flashes of lightning every second. And each burst of lightning creates an electromagnetic waves that begin to circle around the Earth and capture between the Earth's surface and boundary about 60 miles up. Some of the waves, if they have just the right wavelength, combine increasing in strength to create a repeating atmospheric heartbeat known as the Schumann resonance. And this resonance provides a useful tool to analyse Earth's weather. It's an electric environment, and it even helps determine what types of atoms and molecules exist in the Earth's atmosphere. And this frequency was predicted by this dude Schumann mathematically. And that's kind of interesting because they found it. And so in principle, it's the background of the electromagnetic frequencies, or it's just this background frequency of the Earth, and you can see them here. The 7.83, 14.3, 20.8, 27.3, 33.8 hertz. So that means these are certainly affecting the Schumann resonances. Could affect our brain function. So if our Earth's atmosphere, so if we deplete it with ozone and, that deplete the ozone layer and all this kind of things, we could actually be affecting it with pollution and stuff like this. And so if the Schumann resonances sort of went out, it would actually affect how we think. So the geopathic stress is basically a distorted or disrupted electromagnetic field of the Earth, so of the Schumann resonance. So the Earth's natural electromagnetic field are these Schumann resonances, and so this the first one, the 7.83, which is the fundamental one, that's in the alpha state. So if we go back and look at the alpha state here, this is this healing, light sleep, meditation, intuition, dreaming, no time and space. Here is the Schumann resonance. So this would interfere with this alpha state if we had that. Oh, going the wrong way, sorry. Okay. So things that can cause geopathic stress are underground streams, sewers, water pipes, electricity, tunnels, railways, mineral formations, geological faults. And so all these things create geopathic stress. And, you know, even sleeping or spending a lot of time in a geopathic stress zones can have ill effects on our health, performance and well-being. And certainly anyone who's worked with kinesiology and geopathic stress has known that actually the geopathic stress is something that some people are really susceptible to, and some people are more susceptible than others. And it's like being resilient to stress, and it's like being resilient to electromagnetic radiation. And that's why some people are so sensitive to electromagnetic radiation and some people are not. So some people are being affected by, you know, the 3G and 4G and maybe the 5G, but other people aren't affected as much. And so certainly these are the things that you can consider. But this whole idea is all these stresses, whether, you know, geopathic stress, you know, the microwave radiation stress from telephones, are all creating like a electromagnetic stress that can affect us. And I think the way people are affected more is to do with the sensitivity of their chakra system. Some people have more sensitive chakras than others, and therefore they're affected more. And to me, it's the only explanation I can think of. So I would also be looking, if I'm balancing people for EMF stress, I'd certainly be looking at the working with chakras to strengthen their chakra system so you can be more resilient to that stress. And any kind of resilience is actually the ability to cope with stressful situations. Some people are more resilient than others. And, you know, as far as stress goes, like psychological stress, the main marker for psychological stress is the perceived stress. And some people are just more, you know, one thing for one person, that's not stressful. For someone else, that's completely stressful. And, you know, for one person, you know, they're not stressed out by not many things, and other people are totally stressed out because how they perceive stress is more in depth and more affects them more. And so it's the perceived stress scale, and it'd be almost like there's a perceived stress in the chakras. If your chakras are more sensitive, then they perceive more stress from something than the next person would. So one person mightn't be so affected by geopathic stress. They mightn't be affected by microwave radiation so much, where the next person is. And so the thing is about, you know, like there's one thing we can't do is change what's in the environment around you. We've already had microwaves with the 3G and 4G for like years. And now we're getting the 5G, which you can see is a much, you know, instead of being in the megahertz range, it's in the gigahertz range. So, but still you're going to have to be resilient to stress. And the way you can support people, I think, is by balancing their chakra system. So I've got some interesting comments here. Underground factors include fracking. I reckon it would, you know, because, I mean, fracking is unbelievable. I mean, how they can justify sticking all those chemicals so far down into the Earth's water table, it's, to me, is beyond belief. But anyway, they've got some test somewhere that says it's safe. But anyway, another one person talks about the Bluetooth causing drilling pain in the ear. You could definitely do a minor chakra ear balance to support that. and I would do the EMF, balance the electromagnetic frequencies, and I'll get more into the details of how you balance that at the end. And then Belinda's saying about solar flares might be categorized. Well, that's kind of interesting too, but it would definitely be putting out some kind of frequency, and they can probably even measure it. So at the end, it's all just frequency. And I'll talk about actually what it is towards the end when we look at the kinesiology. And for me, it was very interesting because when I first looked at it, I was looking at it in terms of cellular pathology, but then I got to understand it's actually electromagnetic radiation. So you've got to consider the electromagnetic carrier particles, such as the photon, that carry that stress. So it's a very interesting people asking about Bluetooth. I'm not sure what Bluetooth is, but you could look it up. Probably find what frequency is Bluetooth. It's again just a frequency. It's a wireless communication. Same with your modems in your house. You can get devices that measure them. You know, like I used to have one. I don't know what happened to it. I got it in Germany. It was really good. It can measure all these frequencies, and it was fascinating when you looked at a phone. The phone really puts out the highest levels of, you know, the dial when it went up when you're making a call and when you're receiving a call, but when you're actually on the call, the dial went right down. And so the highest levels of frequency in a telephone are when you're before, you know, just that bit where you're wanting the phones to connect. Once they're connected, the level of radiation goes down. Now, I found that was interesting, but you know, all of these wireless technologies, they're all transmitting on some bandwidth of frequency. So in the end, oh, here we go, 2.445 gigahertz for Bluetooth. I've got 3 people, Margaret, Melanie and Rachel, on you guys. But in quick succession. So there you go. That's what happens now when you teach people and they've got Google at their fingertips. They can look up everything you say and tell you something. So people always fact check me all the time now. It never used to happen. But anyway, I don't mind. If I'm wrong about something, I'm happy to admit it. I have no attachment to information. To me, I just find it all interesting. And, you know, I was talking to someone recently, and, you know, like I sat on this EMF stuff for like 3 years before I even put it into a workshop because I just never got round to it. And, you know, sometimes, oh, I better do this. And it just happened to bring it out this year when there's all this 5G and then this coronavirus hit. And so now, I mean, I'm teaching it for the second time this week, and I'll be teaching it more, I guess, later in the year, next year, around the world. And it's just interesting, the timing of doing things, because even though I had the material, for me, when I'm actually producing something into an actual manual, into a course, I have to see the purpose of it, and I have to see how it fits into the current body of knowledge of kinesiology. Someone's even put in modems at 2.4 to 5 gigahertz. So they're all in there. Just let's go back and look at, hang on. Look at that. If we go back to this, so you can see this here. So it's this here, 2.5. They're all around here. That's in this. They're all microwaves. Same as 3G and 4G, the Bluetooth. They're all around this area. And that's high that's higher than 3G and 4G. 3G and 4G is mainly in the megahertz range. It's like about it's about 700 to 2100 megahertz. So it exists in this range, but at the lower end, where you've got Bluetooth and modems, are at the higher end of this range of microwaves. So, you know, even though you have microwaves. You've got your modem on, you know, it's like, do you turn your modem off at night or do you leave it on? I leave it on. I'm too slacked. I just forget about that. But, you know, but they're transmitting microwaves. So we're living with these microwaves. It's just with the 5G, it's just the higher frequency of it. You know, as I said before, it's 6 to 100, and which is basically this whole lower here, 6 to 100. So that goes into here, and then 30 to 300. So it's basically, it's the entire range of these two frequencies here of microwaves that you're working with for 5G. Okay. Okay, someone's saying Schumann resonance raised 158 on the 9th of December. I didn't know that. Okay. Well, there you go. All right, so back to the geopathic stress model. And certainly things like people were talking, and there are things, you know, like with feng shui and everything you can do for your house. And I certainly have looked at that, and, you know, especially if you're not sleeping well, or there's a lot of interesting kind of things happen in a house. So the geopathic stress model, so the fundamental one, 7.83, is the natural frequency of the Earth's magnetic field, and it can be distorted by many things. So this is the model of how geopathic stress is a distortion of the Schumann resonances. Yeah, someone's just said you can't change what's around you, but you can build up resilience. And most children who are born now seem to adapt to different frequencies very well. That's so true. And a friend of mine said a long time ago, even I think when 4G came out, and they said, you know, the people who can't cope with these, you know, that they won't, you know, people who can't survive in this world with all these radiations, they'll die out. But the people who can will, you know, it'll just be Darwinian adapting to the environment, you know. And Darwin said it's not the smartest, it's not the strongest, it's the most adaptable that survives. So we have to adapt to it. And the whole idea of building resilience in chakras and all these things here, you look at this model of geopathic stress, and you've got this mode for geopathic stress. And I think it comes from Richard Utt, because it was in his body of work when I trained all those years ago at the college, the original college that doesn't exist anymore in Melbourne. And it was in the original applied physiology body of work of this mode for geopathic stress. So certainly you could work with geopathic stress, and again, it's just a disruption of the electromagnetic field. And so all of these stresses, where they're radiation, microwave, ionizing, you know, geopathic stress, it's all of it is all about, you know, just this electromagnetic stress, and how do we cope with it? How do we talk about this, and how do we cope with these frequencies in our energetic field? And I just find all these things very interesting, you know, like the whole concept of the different electromagnetic radiations and why someone is reacting to one and someone another. So let's look at some other things. The visual spectrum, this is in the near ultraviolet, and you can see between 405 to 700 and 90 T hertz, and they are in the near ultraviolet frequency range. And you can see here, this is basically where it is here in the ultraviolet, and this is infrared, microwave, and down here you've got your FM and AM, and right down to your long radio waves down to Russian hackers again. Okay, right down to down there. And so this, you've got this tiny little band of visual spectrum, but this spectrum here again, it is a radiate, you know, is a frequency. And it's just that as the light, you know, and as the light comes into our eye and it hits the retina, that we have these cones in the retina that respond to different frequencies, and we have three. We have the red, the blue, and the green cones, and then from the way they react to light, our brain reconstructs colour in the cortex. And so this means that we could possibly have just a disruption to the we could have a disruption to our frequency, to our vision from specific electromagnetic radiations, especially up here in the ultraviolet spectrum. And this is certainly like we get that, you know, because what happens is the light, say in the day, the light from the sun, it hits something, it reflects, and that reflection changes the wavelength, and so then we perceive colour. So when we look at the blue ocean or the green trees, it's all all this frequency. MRI, again, 1 to 300 megahertz, and they have these receivers and multiple coils. So, you know, someone who's had an MRI, I mean, we just had this interesting discussion about it, and I was just fascinated by it. It's like, oh yeah, if someone's been for an MRI, they might need balancing for their stress of the electromagnetic radiation later to the MRI. And same with the auditory range. You see this is really down low, 20 hertz, which is down in the brainwave frequency to 20 kilohertz. We have a very broad, very large range of auditory range. So, you know, I find that interesting as well. So what happens in the, you know, with the auditory system, as the sound comes into our ear, it gets transferred from the outer ear to the inner ear, and it just pushes down on our hair, and we get this thing that pushes, the waves cause our hair cells to fire, and then so then we perceive different frequencies of sound. And because it does that, you can listen to music and tell, you know, understand the different melodies. You can also listen to someone talking to you, and you can say you can understand what they're saying because your brain does that. So that's kind of interesting. So looking at some acupressure formats anyway, and this is what I mentioned before, and this is what I found pretty fascinating, is that I originally started with this cellular pathology format here, cell times pathology plus spleen 16. You can see I've put the modes in there for you because I realised before I sent this out, I thought, oh, people are going to come asking for all these modes. So I put them in there so no one has to ask me for the modes now. And so this is cell mode, which is an anatomy mode, deep touch, and pathology mode. So it's cellular pathology, and then spleen 16 specifically for cellular pathology due to radiation. So that's basically the formats from my Immune 1 course, where I've got all these different pathologies, but this is a specific one for radiation. And then the force, the electromagnetic force, is one of the 4 forces known in physics. And so again, from my nutrition and chakra workshops, we've got force mode plus heart, because heart alarm, this is a heart alarm point. And so what that means, this is the force acting upon you. And so with electromagnetic stress, as these electromagnetic radiations come in affect us, they act upon us. Okay, and oxygen, this is for the reactive oxygen. This is from my nutrition mode times stomach 18 on the right. Electron mode, again, this comes from the nutrition and chakra workshops. So you've got energy mass mode plus the small intestinal alarm point deep touch. The cell membrane is cell mode plus kidney 19. That's from my immune 1 course. And the same with DNA. These are formats of the organelles, which are the parts of the cell. And so DNA was cell mode plus kidney 21 because we're looking at it as an organelle, not as a biochemical process. So I use this. There is another format like a Riddler point for it, which is more nutrition thing. So, and of course you've got all the modes there which you can look at. The GMS mode, force mode, pathology mode. Put them all in there for you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, how would you use this for balancing? Well, so what we will do is, so what I'll do is show you how I could use it for balancing, because, you know, so there's one thing we can look at. As I said, we would need to look at how we can make our chakras more resilient is one thing, but also our body systems as well, because we're looking at, you know, on a physical point of view, what we do is we look at the body systems and how the radiation might affect, I don't know, you might have liver problems, or, you know, I've got problems in my spleen, or I've got intestinal problems. But also you'd be looking at the chakras and even the connected chakras. So, or as someone was talking about, like before, with asked about the ear, when you're listening, you've got a headphone in, or you put the phone to your ear, and you've got the ear chakra there. And so so you could look at, you know, using, well, I mean, I think most of you know chakra mode, and for minor chakras, I use double chakra mode for minor chakras. So, you know, you can test that, you know, like, do I need to check for a chakra? Do I need to check for a minor chakra? Oh, I'm balancing myself now. I need to check for a minor chakra. Okay, so I could, is it my ear? Is it my liver? My liver chakra. So my liver chakra is back just here. It's on the right side of my body, opposite the spleen chakra. Okay, and I'll just adjust the. So if you look at the liver chakra here and the spleen chakra there, so the liver chakra. So I can just put that in circuit. I'm just using my circuit. So I can put this EMF force mode. So I showed you force mode and the heart alarm point. Okay, and then I can just put energy into my liver chakra. And so it's like the electromagnetics just coming into my liver chakra. And for those of you, I don't know if anyone's ever, I mean, the only place I've ever seen anyone write about the liver chakra is actually in my work, because I wrote about it and I haven't seen anyone else write about it. It's about transformation, because the liver transforms your toxins. So the liver is the chakra of the alchemist. And so where you transform your lead into gold, which is basically the true alchemist takes all your negativity and you transform it. So when you get stuck in negative patterns and things like this is the liver chakra. And, you know, like, you know, liver is also a lot of anger and wood elements, rage. And so you get caught in that really angry, resentful, you know, you did this to me, or you did that, or, you know, I'm angry at you, and stuff like this. And you can't transform the anger. And the liver chakra helps you transform, because that's your lead, that's your shit is your lead. And when you want to transform it, that's it in gold, you know, so you become, you know, at peace. you know, with the person who's done you wrong. So then we can look at if I want to put the liver. So we're working on my liver. Probably need it, you know. Lockdown, few beers too many in lockdown. I guess a lot of people have got that, or wine or whatever. I'll put anatomy gland and the liver alarm point in. Okay. And now we're talking about that. I can again try the EMF. So force mode and heart alarm point. And now, though I'm working on my liver, I'm going to put energy into my liver chakra. Okay. And I can do cellular pathology now. I can use that. So cell mode and pathology mode together. And then spleen 16. And again, I'll put energy into my liver chakra. Of course, you can test, you put a format in, and then if you've got stress, you de-stress it, or you might find something else to do, but I want to kind of simplify it. I mean, I suspect here people are professional kinesiologists. You know how to deal with that. Okay. So we want to have the reactive oxygen. So the reactive oxygen is about oxygen and electrons, right? So that's why I put those two formats in. So nutrition times stomach 18 on the right's here. I can put that in. And I'll correct it. And then again, I'll put energy into my liver chakra as it's transforming. The liver is the alchemist. The true alchemist is someone who can transform their negativity. And, you know, and when you look at it, the yin aspect of the liver chakra is understanding that you have something to transform, and the yang aspect of it is actually doing the transformation. My teacher used to say the power was making the unknown known. And, you know, so that's understanding you have something to transform. I mean, that's like often the biggest battle is actually admitting it's my problem and not blaming the outside world, you know. And so if any kind of radiation or whatever stress, electromagnetic or other kinds of stress, it's how you respond to it. You have to be responsible for you and how you respond. And, you know, and I find that what's going on, this whole world, you know, the issues of 5G and coronavirus around at the moment, they're just these huge issues on the planet at the moment. And how we respond is absolutely up to you, you know. And I've certainly been challenged a lot more than other people. I mean, I was in Europe when it all started going. I had to come running home at faster than the speed of light, you know, and I made it back to Australia, you know, so I could isolate in my house and not have to go to a hotel room. But, you know, it's just how you respond. And, you know, when pressure's down, do you like freeze or do something about it? Okay. So I want to put the electron now. So it's energy mass mode, which is like this. I'll put small intestine alarm point, deep touch. Always in my formats, if there's a meridian with no point, it means the alarm point. Okay. And then we want to and out, because we're working on my liver, the cell membrane. So I'll put cell mode and kidney 19. Okay. Again, I'm going to put some energy into my liver. I love kinesiology. It astonishes me how it works. And I keep doing it, you know, for 20 years I've been writing. I'm more than 20. Wrote my first courses in 98, so it's 22 years now. Been writing courses, and it just astonishes me that every time I keep writing them and how well they work. You know, people keep coming back and telling me how many people they've helped with it. You know, then this DNA cell mode. I want kidney 21's a bit up higher. Okay. Higher than 19. So that's an example of how you can use it. I'm balancing myself, but you can use it with your clients. Just these simple steps, you know. I mean, it's not the full detail, you know, like in the 2-day workshop, I'm going into all this detail of stuff that I'm not doing here, obviously. But this still gives you something to work with. And you can certainly add extra stuff in. Like if you want to balance someone to the 5G, then you can just say, you can look at that frequency range. Or if you want to balance someone to, I don't know, Schumann resonances, geopathic stress, you know, they're different frequencies. You just have to test where the frequency is. And I gave you that chart of the complete frequency range from the very low one from 3 to 30 hertz up to the gamma rays. And that's what they say. That's what I found as the EMF. I mean, I suppose it goes higher. I don't know, but that's what they had. So that when I looked it up, that's what I came up with. And from there, everything came from that. And so that's how you can work with it. And so even if you're working with, say, telephones, concerned about a telephone, you can like do the ear chakra and then balance as the organ, the inner ear, for example. Or even the middle ear. In the middle ear, you've got the little ossicles and those the 2 little muscles, the really smallest muscles in the human body, the tensor tympani and the stapedius muscle. And the outer ear, you've got the eardrum and all of the things in there. And so this is, you know, or whatever. Someone's got an MRI, you know, like I had one when I had my ski accident. I had to get one done on my ankle. And so they stuck me in there. And once a friend of Charles at Harvard Medical School in Boston, my sister lives there, so I was there and I went to visit him and he said, "Oh, I've got funding for MRIs, let's scan your brain." And I went in there with my head first into this MRI and I get claustrophobic and I almost died and they had to bring me out because the guy could see, the technician. They put a handkerchief over my face, but I got through it, but they said, "Oh, we won't do the second one." It's like, okay, thank you. I'm claustrophobic. So anyway, that's the thing. So it's all frequency. They're all frequencies of the electromagnetic force, which has the photon as the carrier particle. It's one of the 4 known forces of physics. It's what keeps electrons orbiting the atom. It's what the sunlight you see as photons, that, you know, the light is actual photons. So it's around us all the time. We evolved with it. It's on the planet. There's just, you know, to me, I just see all of them as frequencies, and some people have more stress around others, some frequencies than other ones. And so what I feel like we have to do is look at which frequencies are stressful for that person. And we can, you know, okay, if people are stressed out about 5G, it might even be more perceived stress because people might even be more stressed out about the concept of it, you know. But it's still perceived, so you need to work with it. So, or if people are stressed out, you know, that, you know, you've got these other ones, the hole in the ozone layer, you know, especially if you're living down around South Australia or something where it is, you know, you're obviously going to have more ionizing radiation and you've got more incidences of skin cancer like we do in Australia. So again, but that's just another frequency. And all that, you know, and the geopathic stress, I think, is very big with the disruption of the Schumann resonance, because these, you know, even natural things like streams and things and mineral deposits cause it. Now we're doing more things like we're building tunnels and all kinds of things we're doing, and putting stuff in the earth. It's going to create geopathic stress. And so even, you know, the radio waves we put in, you know, like we have the Bluetooth and the modems, we have the the microwaves for 3G, 4G and 5G. You know, we've even had radio waves all that time where we're transmitting radio and television and things like this. They're all electromagnetic radiation and could cause some level of stress. And so, you know, to me, I just look at it that. I just see, well, there is electromagnetic radiation. Some people are more resilient than others. So what we need to really look at is, when we're looking at this, is how do we make people more resilient? And I think we really need to work the chakra system along with the effect in the body, and then look at the reactive oxygen and reactive nitrogen pathways. If you want to take something, certainly take our antioxidants, and I would recommend going to a health professional for that, to get on the right antioxidants for you in your situation, because if they are creating more reactive oxygen stress, which is the actual physiological result in your body, then you need more antioxidants. You need vitamin C, you need to support your glutathione production, you need vitamin E. Do you know what I mean? Even SOD, but it's a protein. So the only decent one I saw was in the UK when I was there once. They had drops that you took under your tongue, you absorbed under your tongue, because if you swallow SOD, you're just going to, it's a protein, you'll break it down to individual amino acids. Though it will maybe support the SOD that works in your intestines, because we do have it there. And certainly you find it in your mucous membranes. It's very important to protect against reactive oxygen stress that you can get in your mucous membranes. That would help, but otherwise I would certainly be looking at supporting the antioxidants and balancing the chakras for resilience, and also, you know, breaking down the different frequencies of electromagnetic radiation and saying, well, you know, is this person showing stress? Because to me, when I look at kinesiology is really just I call it a stress management tool. What kinesiology does is it manages stress. The indicator muscle, neurologically, is a reaction from stress in your system. It's straight from the periaqueductal grey matter. You know, when it tenses up really strong or it goes weak, it's because there's stress in your system, and your brain says, oh, or like this, and that's what it is. It can only indicate stress, and people use it as a diagnostic tool and all these other things, and I just don't agree with that. You know, all I can tell you that there's stress. It's a wonderful thing, because it can just, it can help. What stress does it reveal? But how do we equalize the stress? It tells you that too. So let's work with the chakra system or the meridians. Let's make people's energetic bodies more resilient to these things, because they're going to happen whether we complain or not. And we can't, you know, we have to adapt to it in our life, you know. That's what I think. And even me, who travels a lot, not at the moment, but when you're up in the airplane, you're certainly more susceptible to electromagnetic radiation when you're, you know, 35,000 feet in the air. And they can get up to 40,000, you know. When you look at the thing and go, oh, we're 40,000, we're that high, wow. You know, and then we come down. But anyway, but while we're up there, I think we're more susceptible to it, and it'd be interesting, kind of interesting. Anyway, so yeah, so there's a lot of thank you. Like Yolanda just mentioned, uranium in the Himalayas. Yeah, same here. There's a lot of uranium in it. It's the minerals. Minerals in the earth do create it. You know, that you get their geological distribution of what's in the earth. But, you know, this has been around in the earth. We've been living with this since human civilizations began. We've been living with electromagnetic stress. It's just that now we create more. When we started using even radio waves, now we use all these wireless technologies in our home and everything like that. So anyway, so I guess that's my rant for the day. But I hope you all enjoyed it, and thank you everyone for coming online again to pass the time with me in this lockdown. It's part of my, I guess it's part of me being a bit ADD, is that I've got to have something to do. So I've done all of this. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is thank you, everyone. And next week we'll have the next one, I suppose. So.